Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on presentation skills, leadership, visibility, communication challenges, and all the things that are involved in becoming more visible and more valued. Before I begin with today's very special episode, I'd like to offer you an opportunity to see where your presentation skills are strong at our free 4-minute assessment at Speak for Results Quiz. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can find out where you are strong as a presenter, whether it's within your company or speaking to a crowd, and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you better results and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Tina Greenbaum, who is a frequent guest on this podcast. Please check out in the show notes. She was one of the first people I interviewed about mastery under pressure. She was also, I just did a recent interview with her on how to be a catalyst leader. And in the course of that conversation, we talked about negotiation. And Tina also has a course on how to be a confident negotiator. And I thought that is a whole separate conversation. Well, not only was it a whole separate conversation, it was 2 conversations. I interviewed her live a couple of weeks ago, and we only got about halfway through because we had so much to say. So we brought her back for a second interview. That means that this episode is going to be a little bit longer than the normal ones, but it's going to be so worth it. I urge you to hang in there. And now let's go to part 1 of how to be a confident negotiator with Tina Greenbaum.
Hello and welcome to Strategic Speaking for Results, and the podcast Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host. This is my weekly broadcast, and I am so happy to have you here because I have my wonderful friend and colleague, Tina Greenbaum. I'm just thrilled to have Tina. Tina's one of my favorite people to interview. She's a regular guest on the podcast. We spoke a week or so ago, and I realized there was a big project that I hadn't asked her about. So I wanted to get a chance to bring her on again to talk about negotiation and confident negotiation. How can you be a confident negotiator? So Tina, welcome.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. As always, we always have so much fun.
Welcome back. Yes, let me quickly do the official bio, which is that Tina Greenbaum is the founder and CEO of Mastery Under Pressure, a management coaching program for high-performing executives who need to refine and master their interpersonal and interdepartmental skills. And I have taken this course. I learned a lot. And I regularly go back to Tina to go, oh, Tina, wait, help. Tina's like my go-to person for when I need extra advice. The good thing about Mastery Under Pressure is it gives CEOs and senior level managers the additional professional and personal tools they need to excel and to empower their teams and their associates and to operate within any corporate culture. It's what Tina means by make your best better. So Tina, welcome back to Speakers Who Get Results, Strategic Speaking for Results. Why did you create a course for how to be a confident negotiator?
Well, I'll start with a story that happened to me. that was the impetus and the genesis of this course. A number of years ago, I was at a conference and we started to talk, and he said, well, tell me a little bit more about your work. And I told him a little, and he said, well, let's meet later this afternoon. And so we made an appointment, and we met. But in between those two times, I'm saying to myself, how much are you going to charge? I knew he had a very successful business, and I decided that I was going to charge $2,000 a month, which was more money than I had ever charged anybody before. And so we go to have the conversation, and we're sitting there and we're talking, and he said, so how much do you charge? And I said, $1,500 a month. And he said, oh, is that all? Really? I would have paid you a whole lot more. And I said, oh my God, Tina, what did you do? But as Elizabeth and I were talking a little bit before, I kind of had to look, what did I do? How did I get there? How did I give my power away in an instant? I was just ready to say something, and something else completely came out of my mouth. So a lot of the investigation of the interpersonal work, this is just a piece of a lot of the work that I do, is really kind of gaining that inner mastery. So this is a piece of that, and I think a really important piece for everybody. Well, yes.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about negotiation. It's not, people tend to assume it's all about salary and negotiating your salary, which certainly is a very scary thing, because it's about you and your income and putting a price on how good you are. What do I charge is one of the things that really, when I started my opera company and I had to raise money, I had to ask for money on my own behalf. And that was really, that was very scary. It took me a while to learn how to do that. What negotiations would you talk about besides salary?
Well, again, it may be for salary, but you may also be a consultant like you and I are. And so we're selling our services. You may be negotiating with your kids. You may be negotiating with a parent. You may be negotiating to buy a house. Negotiating is everywhere. We're always looking to get the best bang for our buck. And we have to be able to have a pretty good sense of how to do that without getting involved in some of the other feelings that may come up while we're negotiating, like fear.
Yeah.
Or somebody else, somebody else's feelings, am I too much? So many other things that can go on in between you and you.
Yes, in between you and you. Good way to put it. I do remember when I was right out of college, moved to New York, and my best friend, Doug, told me he'd gone and negotiated to do a gig. He was a writer, so he was to do a writing project for somebody, and he came back and he said, woohoo, I've bought myself an IBM Selectric because I asked for twice as much as I thought I would get, and they gave it to me. And I thought, great, I'm so glad you have an IBM Selectric. For those of you who don't remember, it's pre-computers, that was a typewriter, a fancy typewriter. But also I thought, how did he do that? How did he walk in and ask for twice as much as he thought he would get without trembling inside? Because that's what I would have done. Is this gender linked? Is it personality linked?
Well, I think it's frequently gender linked for those women who, again, perhaps haven't done the personal work of how do I empower myself. We women are relational, and we are empathic by nature. And so we frequently worry about how other people are going to feel and what are they thinking. And men don't do that quite so much. They kind of have an idea. It's not that men are always confident, because I have 3 sons, and I don't think that that's necessarily true, but they have a different angle. They go for it. They just kind of go for what they're looking at. And because we have lots of pathways that go on both sides of the brain, and we're thinking about this and we're thinking about that, and who am I and why am I good enough? And these are so many of the issues that women deal with kind of growing up. Women.
We are socialized that way. Absolutely.
But the interesting thing is, and I think that there's been a whole movement, certainly young girls up until the age of maybe 12 or 13, we're pretty equal to the boys. We can excel in math, we can excel in here. And then around adolescence, pre-adolescence, adolescence, the peer group becomes so important.
Mm-hmm.
And when the peer group sometimes takes over, the girls sometimes go underground.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be the area where we kind of become very, very, very conscious about our appearance and about our weight and all kinds of other things. And a lot of insecurities come up, and we kind of take off from there.
Yeah.
And that's a piece of it. I mean, it's a complicated thing, but by nature, we are nurturers, we are gatherers, and we take care of people. So we frequently want to take care of the person who we're negotiating with.
Okay. I have never actually thought of that. I always thought as the big reframe I found, and I found that in speaking, is I always thought if I was going in and offering something and then asking them to invest in themselves through me, I would be taking something from the client, as opposed to offering them a gift, that my services are a gift, and this is a gift that they are going to value more if they invest in.
Right.
Yeah.
So again,
that's the reframe that I use now at my age. I certainly couldn't do that in my 20s.
No. And that's really why people hate salespeople. Because when we come from a place of desperation, and I talk about this in the course, when you come from a place of desperation, whether you say it or not, people can pick it up. And it's like, I need you. I need the sale. I need the salary. And it feels yucky and sticky. And people, again, in a nonverbal way, they don't exactly know what they're picking up, but it doesn't feel good.
Right.
And so part of being that confident negotiator is really exactly what you said, coming from that place is I have something that's pretty special, and I can help you get where you want to go.
Well, you've brought your slides today, so why don't you take us through, and I don't want to ask you some questions.
Sure. So we start out with, what are the signs of a good negotiator? Right? We're looking at kind of the big picture. Well, let's get the slides moving, and they won't move. Why won't they move? Okay.
Here we go.
So problem analysis. We have to know, be able to kind of listen and analyze what exactly is the problem. Right? We have to prepare. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. And, I go into that in great detail in this Confident Negotiator course. You have to be an active listener. Actually, I call myself a professional listener because that's what I am. And it is a skill that you can hone and really, really grow into, so that people actually will want to hear what you have to say. Emotional control. This is the other area that is incredibly important, because if you're negotiating from that place that feels desperate and you cannot control it, you may feel it, but you want to make sure that the other person doesn't feel it too. So we have to know how to control ourselves. Verbal communication, being a good communicator, not a lot of uhs and ums. And so again, that has a lot to do with confidence, that you are a speaker that can speak from, energetically, and that you know what you're talking about. And if you're part of a team and you're collaborating as a team, you have to be able to be a good team member and work together as a team. And the problem solving goes pretty well with the problem analysis. I can analyze the problem, and I know how to solve it. And when the other person on the other side knows and really feels that you are the answer, this is a huge key to getting the position that you want. You have to be able to make decisions quickly. Negotiations move quickly. Somebody may shift, and then you have to tweak yourself. So you have to be very present and not lost in some other thought about what you thought you were going to say about 10 minutes before.
Yeah.
You have to be together with that. Interpersonal skills. Again, a good negotiator has somewhat of a poker face, but they also can be warm at the same time. They can make eye contact. They can let you know that I care about you. I care about what it is that you're doing and that we're working on. And the ethics and reliability, I think, speaks for itself. So in the work that I do and the course that I'm working on is preparation, active listening, and emotional control are the three areas that are perhaps a little bit different than most negotiating courses, because I'm not going to teach you all about the negotiation. It's really how to be confident when you're negotiating.
I love that. So the details of the deal may always be different, but
Exactly.
it's what we're doing inside that matters. Which is why, of course, you come to Tina, who is a trained therapist and do all of that. So where do we start?
Well, we start with preparation. Let's see. Okay, so for every sale, again, whether you're selling your services, whether you're selling yourself, whatever is it that you're selling, there's some really great things to think about. People buy on emotion and they justify with logic. So what does that mean? One of my favorite examples is when I was looking for a new house. Over the years that I was married to the person I was married to, we liked real estate. And we were always thinking about moving. So we'd love to go in and look at houses. And I would go into a house and I would feel excited. Like I could see myself there. And early on, I would turn around and say to my husband, "Oh, I really like this place," and he would just kind of look at me again with that poker face. And because he knew that my emotion was not necessarily the best way to buy a house. And he had a rule for himself that he would never make a major purchase unless he knew it was exactly what he had been looking for a long time. He would never make a major purchase without sleeping on it. Because once we get through the emotion, then we start to justify with logic. Does this make financial sense? Can I afford it? All the other things that have to come in. And if you have a tendency to be ride on your emotions and be somewhat impulsive, sometimes we make some not so very good decisions. So this is a really huge.
Oh, yes. The emotional decisions. Yes.
How many of us have made emotional decisions
Right.
and then turn around and say, excuse me. So your job is to identify the problems that the person in front of you has and the desired outcome that they want. So this is what we call, in sales, they call the gap. The gap between, and the bigger the gap, here it is, the bigger the gap, the greater the possibility how you can insert yourself as the person who can actually be that one that can give them the outcome that they desire.
Actually, this would be a good place to interject. I'd love to hear your definition of the relationship between negotiation and sales, because this is indeed sales.
That's right. So if you walk into a store and there's a price tag on something, particularly in our culture, we don't negotiate. It's, it's $100, it's $100. You can buy it or not. When the price is not set, and I have a whole series of ways to kind of look at your own behavior when the price is not set. That's where the negotiation comes in. My son is teaching tennis right now. And so one of the women that I play with was interested in hiring his services. And I gave her the price that he charges. And then she said, well, how about $5 less? She's already negotiating with me. Yeah. It's not my job, it's his
Mhm.
job. But her natural tendency was to try to get away with less.
People like to think they've got a deal.
And so a great negotiation, we have to understand in negotiations, most frequently, neither party will get all of what they want.
Mhm.
Part of negotiating, right? I have to give a little, I have to take a little, and so on. But a successful negotiation is everybody walks away feeling that they got something.
So it's a dance, really.
It is a dance.
Or you could say it's a game if you like games, or if you
Mhm.
don't like that, you think of it as a dance,
Yes,
and everybody winds up happy.
that's right. So you have to be able to think of a lot of things while you're talking.
Mhm.
What's really going on? What am I willing to do? And this gets into more of some of the skill around this. Know where you're going to start the negotiation.
Aha. Yes.
Okay? And just like what you talked about your friend Doug, he was willing to come in high.
Mhm.
And my son and I, one of my sons and I, we watched a negotiation course, and the guy was English, and he kept talking. He said, "Just wait for them to go." He called it the flinch. Oh my God, that's too much. And he said, when you come in there, you know that you're coming in high, and now this is a good place to start.
Mhm.
When they go, "Oh my God, I can't ever afford that."
Mhm.
They're not willing to afford it, or maybe they can afford it. And your job again, in the sales and negotiation, is to be able to handle the objections that people come up with.
Mhm.
It's another skill,
Right.
right? So know where you're going to start the negotiation. So
Mhm.
let's just say, if I go back to that example of my first negotiation with this guy, let's just say I had wanted to end up at $2,000.
Mhm.
So I could have and should have started it at $2,500.
Right. Right.
Knowing full well that there was a possibility that he was going to take it just as, okay, that's what she charges,
Mhm.
or that he would attempt to, well, could you do it for a little less?
I like to think of the high range of price as when I'm quoting a price. I like to think of the high range as more money than they want to pay and more work that I want to do, but I'll take it if they say yes.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So
and then actually the low range is less money than I want to get and less results, less, not really as much as they really want to get, as they need.
Right.
So that between the two of them, you get to the middle, which is where I really think is the price I'm really expecting.
Right. Which is where most people end up.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, you and I took a course together, and there was the suggestion that you have gold, silver, and platinum.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever the colors were, medium, the low, medium, and high.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, when you have those options, some people will take the low, a few people will take the high, but most people will take the middle because they feel like they're getting enough. Mm-hmm. Maybe not the gold standard, maybe not all of what they would love, but they're getting enough. And then when they look at the lower one, it's like, it's not even worth my money. Right. I'm not going to get what I want.
Okay. So that's, thank you. That's very helpful. I think we did have to mention the S word, that this is actually in terms of sales, even if what you were doing is you were selling your worth to a person who can authorize your paycheck.
That's right.
Or
That's right.
Yeah.
So I remember years ago, my ex-husband did the first international art fair in America. And so he had galleries that came from all over the world. And then he had, and they were representing artists. Mm-hmm. And then he had a small area where the artists were representing themselves. That was tough. It was tough to listen to. It was tough to watch because so many of them were so insecure and so self-identified with their art and their work that if you don't like my artwork, you don't like me.
Yeah. Yeah. When you are the product.
That's right.
That's a hard one. That's a hard separation to make.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So we're probably only on slide 2, and I know you have more. So I'll stop asking you questions because I can ask you questions for hours. What's next?
Okay. So to finish this part out, know your bottom line price. When you're going to walk away, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do frequently is if somebody doesn't want to pay and we feel like, well, I really need this sale, I'm going to lower, I'm going to walk away, and then I'm going to feel badly afterwards. And so it's very hard to walk away when you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it sets a tone and it sets a precedent. And then people start to ask, well, if somebody's going to refer you, and well, how much do you pay her? Well, I pay her this much, but oh no, that's not what I want to charge. I want to charge this much. So you have to think very, very strategically for yourself. If I give this bottom price, how am I going to feel afterwards? Is that a good representation of my work and my efforts? And then you got to be willing to walk away. Or what I call, sometimes I feel called.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I give, I'm talking to somebody and they don't have the money, but I hear their story and I know I can help them. And I know that if I help them, they're going to help so many other people.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's going to be some great impact that they're going to be able to make.
Mm-hmm.
And I never know exactly who it is or what it is. I just know it's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ask me, I might say yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had, for many years of experience, I say I kind of like Robin Hood. If there are people that can pay my full fee, then I can give to the person who in need.
Right.
And so it's put your own oxygen mask on first. Make sure that you're not giving away the bank, that you are getting what you feel good. I believe that in order to be happy with your work, you have to be doing something that you really enjoy, and you have to be getting paid a fair price.
Right. Right. Instead of sacrificing yourself for the sake of everybody else.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's next?
Okay. So what's next? Let's see what's next here. Let me get my slides going. Okay. So this is another really big thing. What else can you offer without caving on your price?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, and you and I are speakers. So let's just say there's a speaker fee that we're asking for. And the organization says, well, I really would love to have you, but we can't afford your fee. And somebody said to me, a very, very wise woman, she says, you never give away yourself for free.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you're speaking for free. You are speaking in exchange for something. So if you can't pay me in dollars, what can you do?
Right.
And then there's a whole bunch of things that they can do. They can mail, send out to their mailing list for you, or they can pay for your books and give the books out, or they could do any number of things that you can exchange. I have an exchange with an organization where I did something for them, and they are now putting me in front of their high-level people.
And one thing to notice, if you're actually in the convention business, is if we ever get into live meetings and conventions again, is things like books to give to everybody. Buying your book comes out of a different line in the budget than the fee for the speaker. So they could probably do that. One of the great ones that I heard, the great Lori Guest told this story of, ask them what the menu is. And if they're serving cheesecake for dessert, cheesecake is expensive. It's an expensive dessert. Ask them if they could maybe just have a plate of cookies on the table and buy your book instead with the money they're saving from not giving a cheesecake to everybody.
I love that.
And she talks about it, and boy, does she actually sells books that way. So in the days when we were meeting live,
yes.
and
so
we will be meeting live again.
Wonderful negotiating, tool.
Yes.
Look for the
Yes.
things that they can do
Mm-hmm.
and that you're willing to accept.
Yeah.
So that it
That's
becomes
great.
a win.
That's wonderful. Tina, there is so much more I want to ask you, but we've been talking about, this is preparation still, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let us move quickly through the next two, and then I'm going to have to tell everybody you've got to go and just take the course. I'm going to take the course because we went so deep into the first thing. I got so interested. Let's keep talking.
So this is kind of what I've done in and the talk that you saw that I did with Watermark. We do a role play.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, and people can think about how they might respond to this, since we don't have the time to kind of, and we don't have partners and all that good stuff. But let's imagine that you are negotiating with somebody and you know that they don't really have very much money, but you know that you can help them.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when we have a way to do this, what does it feel like? Where does your mind go when you are selling yourself and you know that person really doesn't have money?
And would it be thinking about where do we feel it in the body as well? Because that's a big part of what you teach, I know.
That is a big part. And that's where we get into the emotional control of starting to recognize how your body speaks to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you information.
Okay.
And so again, in that, just things that you and I are talking about, I'll go back again to that original story when I was talking to this guy about what I was going to charge him. And this was the most money that I ever charged anybody ever. I was nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I was anxious. And I didn't handle it. I mean, he didn't know the difference. And that was the good news. But I knew the difference. And had I known what I know now and followed my own advice,
yes, I
would have been better prepared, and I would have been able to hold on to myself in a way that I didn't.
So if you're negotiating with someone you really know you can help, but they really can't afford you, where does that, how you feel in that? Right. Well,
again, are you going to give it away? Are you going to get it? Your empathy is so great that you will kind of give something that afterwards you're going to be sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to hold a boundary?
Mm-hmm.
I remember there was a gal at a conference that I went to, and she was the workshop leader, and she had her book and all this stuff. And I really would have loved to work with her. And I asked her how much money she charged. And at the time she said it was $500 an hour. Mm-hmm. And I didn't say a word, and she said, but if you can't afford me, she said, I have other people, that I've trained that charge less than I do, or you could buy my book, or you could come to the next workshop.
Uh-huh.
And she didn't blink.
Yeah. Right.
So that was just a great model for me to kind of put some of those pieces together that we just talked about.
And one of the things that have been very helpful for me is whenever I'm raising my prices, I start saying it to lots of people. Talk mm-hmm. about role playing, mm-hmm. so that when I'm actually talking to a client or a potential client, I've had practice saying that number.
Yes.
And actually, early on in my career, I would go up by $25 an hour. Mm-hmm. And because that was all I could manage. And then I started going up by $100 an hour to get myself up to get used to it, to hearing it come out of my own mouth. Yes.
And so one of the things, Elizabeth, that helped me again, as I was dealing with this and growing into myself, and I'd say to myself, okay, so Tina, how many years have you been doing what you're doing? Mm-hmm. Maybe I was on to 30 or something like that. And how much time and energy and money and effort have you put into training? Hundreds of thousands of dollars, honestly, by the time mm-hmm. if I were to add it up.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think you're worth it?
Mm-hmm.
And then I look around and people who are much newer in the field than I am, and what they were charging. And it's like, okay, so I have to level up.
Uh-huh.
I have to bring myself up to actually where I really am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a
Right.
professional, been a psychotherapist, I've been a trainer, I've been done workshop for 30 some years. Now I'm going on 38. And so how much more training do I need?
Right. Right.
Really?
Oh,
And
you still may feel 12 inside.
absolutely. At times we do. At times we do.
Mhm.
But just like you said, the more that I started to talk to myself that way, level up, just bring yourself up to where you actually are and the way that actually other people perceive you. Because if I
Right.
didn't get the feedback that what I was doing was worthwhile, I wouldn't have any business at all.
Mm-hmm.
So my business has always been successful. And again, this comes back into the emotion stuff, which we won't have much time to talk about, but it's really about whatever your blueprint is,
Right.
or how much money you think that you can make or you deserve,
Mhm.
you will create that level.
Great.
And as
Yes.
you begin to start to expand your horizons and I go on like this, if those of you can see me, it's just because it's an energetic thing. I'm expanding me and my energy, then everything expands. The people that you attract expands and the money that you attract and all of those other wonderful things.
I think actually this would be a good place. Tina, I've been listening to you. I said, I have to have you on again. Since we're doing this live. I think we're going to do this in 2 parts, and I'll bring you on in a couple of weeks, I hope. And you can talk about the rest of it before your course is fully launched. Where can we find out more about the negotiation course?
We have a link. I think you have it, Elizabeth.
And I will post it in under this broadcast. I'll post it in the comments. Right.
Right. So it's Mastery Under Pressure is my brand. It's my company. You can always reach me at tina@masteryunderpressure.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then the link, you can pre-buy the course. This is
okay.
It's in production, and we're giving a discount of 20% to anybody who buys it through you, and the code is confident with a capital.
Confident. Okay, good.
Confident. And you can go there and you can buy it. But basically what will be in the course is we'll be talking again more about preparation. I'm going to be teaching about active listening and assertiveness, and then really delve into emotional control. So this is the inner game, the inner mastery of negotiating.
Oh, well, yes, emotional control. I definitely want to have a whole session with you about this. So we're going to do a whole other broadcast and definitely have to do that. Tina Greenbaum, thank you so much for being on here. I'm going to go back to where it's just us and say thank you so much for having been on the Speakers Who Get Results and Strategic Speaking for Results broadcast. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host. Check in. We are here every Wednesday, and I'm going to have Tina Greenbaum back to talk about the other part so that we can get more information out of her and the fabulous course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
Hello, everybody. This is Elizabeth again. That was the first conversation I had with Tina Greenbaum that was so interesting. I decided I needed another session to get through her material. And to be honest, we talked about active listening. We talked about, you've heard the part about preparation. We also talked about active listening and how to recognize when you are losing your emotional control. That part is coming up along with more stories. There is still a great deal more to be heard from Tina. This is just a taste. But here is part 2 of how to be a confident negotiator with Tina Greenbaum. Tina Greenbaum, thank you so much for coming back to Speakers Who Get Results. Clearly, we had way too much to talk about a couple of weeks ago when we first did this conversation. So I'd like to welcome all of you listeners to Speakers Who Get Results, the podcast, and the Strategic Speaking for Results Facebook page, which is where we are live streaming this conversation with my wonderful friend, Tina Greenbaum. So welcome back, Tina.
Elizabeth, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And last couple of weeks ago, we talked about how to be a confident negotiator and wound up, and actually a couple weeks before that, I interviewed Tina on how to be a catalyst leader. And we had just started the conversation about how to be a confident negotiator. And I said, whoa, stop. That's a whole separate conversation. So this is an adjunct. Those of you who are listening, go back and look at elizabethbachman.com/podcast for my earlier message with Tina about how to be a catalyst leader. And in order to get to the point where you can be a catalyst leader, you need to negotiate. Negotiation is such a huge part of business, of all kinds of business. So Tina, we only got part way through what you were talking about. You have a course about how to be a confident negotiator. And certainly I think about all the ways I have sabotaged myself in negotiations over the years. I really want to learn more. So would you please share your slides here and just review what we talked about last time? Quick review.
Okay, so a quick review. So we looked at what are the skills of a confident negotiator. And what I want to emphasize here, there are many, many skills, but this course emphasizes the emotional skills of what goes on inside between you and you, that the person that you're sitting in front of may or may not have any idea of what's happening. So we want to help you to be really confident inside. So what are the skills of a good negotiator? Problem analysis, kind of figuring out what actually is the problem, preparation, active listening, emotional control. Again, this is a lot of what I do. Verbal communication, collaboration and teamwork. If you're working with a team, to be able to negotiate amongst you. This goes with problem analysis. Once we analyze the problem, how are we going to solve it? And decision-making ability, which sometimes has to happen very, very quickly when you are negotiating, and you have to be able to tweak and twist and move with the speed of what's happening. And your interpersonal skills. People talk a lot of times that they want to have this poker face, which is good, that somebody doesn't maybe know exactly what you're thinking, but you want to be warm. You want to be friendly. You actually can smile in a negotiation. And ethics and reliability, I always say, that speaks for itself. So what we talked about last time was we got a lot through preparation. We're going to talk a little bit today about active listening and emotional control. I don't know how much we're going to get through. I go into this in deeper, detail in the course. And I also add in the course assertiveness training, which we're not going to be talking about today, but also really, 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 really important.
Well, and let me just quickly say, for the decision-making ability, there are people who make decisions just snap, they just know instantly. And then there are other people who, especially for major decisions, they have to think about it. It's really two major personality types. And knowing which one you are, and knowing the sort of person, if you can, the sort of person you're negotiating with, what they're about, is very important. And that's where I really loved what you said about preparation last time, because what I find is I'm best if I think about something, or if I can go away and think about it, if it's new. But when I'm prepared, when I've thought about what are all the possible scenarios that I can come up with, then I can make fast decisions because I've prepared myself.
Correct.
But walking in cold, for me, it's not a good thing, walking in cold.
And the truth is, not only do you know yourself, but your body gives you information, Elizabeth, that lets you know immediately, I'm not ready to make this decision.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing, your style, but also knowing what kind of signals you get from your body will give you that very, very quick feedback as to maybe this is not such a good idea right now for me to give a final decision.
Well, and this is also important for the people you're working with. So I'm working with a team right now, and about half of them are very fast decision makers. They just decide instantly. And then if they have to change something, they'll go back and change it later. And the other half are the ones who really want to think about it so that when they make a decision, they can stick with what they chose. If you're a fast decision maker and the person you're trying to convince sometimes they really do need to go away and think about it, which the fast negotiators don't always appreciate.
Right. So it gets back to a lot of times on sales when they say, we give rewards to people who take action. And if you take action now, then this is what. So this line here is exactly what we're talking about. People buy on emotion and justify with logic.
Right. Yes.
You have to be very, very aware of where your emotion comes into a major decision. And I said last time, my ex-husband taught me a lot of good things he was a very good negotiator, but he would never make a major buying decision without going away and sleeping on it and coming back the next day. Even though he might have really wanted it, he wanted to make sure that all the numbers worked and everything kind of worked before, he would sign on something. So this is such an important subject. Just this one little piece right here.
Right.
When you're negotiating, how you know yourself, how much room you give yourself. And I always kind of like to think about how my brain works. My brain gives me certain information sometimes very, very, very quickly. It comes in pictures and thought fields, and I trust that. And I also trust that feeling of like, don't step your foot into this one.
Yeah.
Just be cautious. And again, these are things that are going on between you and you that somebody might not know. But if you haven't prepared and gotten to know yourself at that deep level, you may make some really kind of not so great decisions.
Which actually is one of the things that I've learned from working with you as when I've taken your Mastery Under Pressure course, was how to recognize the signals that my body is sending me, basically to trust my gut, since I tend to be someone who trusts my head more than my gut. And you really taught me how to notice and trust my gut when a decision comes along.
So one, that you may trust your gut that you're feeling a certain way, and logic may tell you, well, I might have to do this anyway.
Yeah.
So we want the communication between the two. Sometimes we're going to act on our feelings. Sometimes we're going to act on our logic. Sometimes we're going to really have to know which is which and why we're choosing something. So, a lot of meat to this. So quickly, again, your job is to identify their problems and the outcome that they desire. And so once you have an idea of who you're dealing with, what you're dealing with, the purpose is to build the gap between where they are and where you know that you can take them, and how you are that person that can help to get them there. Again, there's a lot of creativity in this as well. And so very quickly know where you're going to start the negotiation. You can start high. And we talked about, there's a fellow that did a course on negotiation. He would talk about the flinch when they go, oh my God, that's so expensive. So when you know that somebody goes, oh my God, that's so expensive, you know that that's about as high as they're willing to go. And then you have your range in between. We did an exercise last time about thinking about negotiating for a salary, or if you're looking for a job, the salary, or you're charging for your services, if you're a consultant like Elizabeth and I are, that you know that the party is struggling financially. What does that do to the way that you approach the negotiation? And we can do this one. Is this Elizabeth, we hadn't done this one.
Mhm.
Was thinking about negotiating for a salary or charging for your services if you know that the other party is thriving financially.
Mhm.
So just
Right.
think about that for a moment. And how would you enter that negotiation? And what kind of questions would you ask yourself?
Then perhaps money is not the key factor. So what or may not be the key objection.
Correct. It
Yeah.
may be time. Time and money are the big ones.
Mhm.
I don't have time for this. I don't have money for it. I need to talk to somebody. I need to check with my boss. I need to check with my husband or my wife. Or there's a lot of kinds of things that people will come up with. And if you have in your mind things that you're willing to trade, they're kind of called in-kind services.
Mhm.
Let's just say that you're doing a speech and you would like them to sell your book.
Mhm.
And they say, well, I can't afford your fee of what you're offering, what you want, but we are willing to sell your book. We'll take a profit and then we'll give you the rest. I mean, there's a million different ways that you can negotiate for something that's going to benefit you.
Right.
It could be,
or for that matter, just saying, well, I really want to do this. Will you commit to sending 3 referrals? That you have to, but you've got to be able to follow that up. You've got to send them something to, you've got to bug them to do it, because most people will say, yeah, of course, and then never do it. So you do have to follow up on that one.
so you always want to think about, okay, so if I have to negotiate on my price, what else can they offer or I can offer? And a good negotiation is everybody walks away feeling like they've gotten something.
Yeah.
Also frequently given up something, but they feel good about that's a good negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get this, but I got that. So, and then lastly, think about how you would negotiate for either a salary or a fee if you had no idea how much that person charged. I mean, what their financial situation was, just kind of blind. And unfortunately, we don't have the feedback from the audience, which I frequently do this exercise in a group. And different people are sometimes all over the place. Well, I felt sorry for them, or, I really thought I could charge them all this money, or, all different kinds of things. But there was a woman that I actually met and went to a training of hers, and I really liked what she did and thought, I'd love to have an individual session with her. And so I asked her how much her fee was. And she said $500 for an hour. Didn't blink an eye. Again, she didn't know me. She didn't know, anything about me, really. She said, but if that doesn't work for you, then I have other trainers that I can, set you up with, or you could read my book, or you could come to another workshop. So she had a whole bunch of things that she was already prepared if I were not that person that would jump onto that fee.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't blink an eye. And that was a really great lesson for me, just kind of watching her. And you charge what you charge, or, as I say, sometimes I feel called to give away my services or to kind of lower my fee. It's my choice. It's my business. I can do that, but I don't do it out of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
Desperation is the worst feeling, being on the other side. I need you. I need your money. And it feels sticky and gooey. And then you kind of walk away and you feel crappy about yourself.
So speaking of that, just quickly, do you have any exercises or tips for us if we find ourselves in that needy, desperate spot?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'd like to tell the story from when I started out as a therapist, and I was very needy and very desperate and very hungry for money. And I was going to set my boundaries very carefully about my hours and especially cancellations. And I got a cancellation at the last minute from someone, and I was on the phone with her, and I said, well, I charge for these cancellations. And she said, but I'm sick. And I hadn't really kind of had my policy kind of figured out at that time. So but I just kind of went too much for that. Well, I'm sorry, but I charge for this. And I lost her. I lost her as a client.
Mhm.
It got so sticky and gooey. So this was 38 years ago, and I can still picture her right in front of me. And I made a decision that I would never talk about the money, kind of that kind of situation, unless it was either person to person. Again, I used to see people in person, and because frequently there was something behind it. There was some therapeutic issue. Was people canceled at the last minute because they didn't want to come, or they thought something else was more important. I started out working with women with eating disorders, and they were binging on the money that they were going to spend on my session. And so I just made a decision that I'd rather have a conversation around the money and write a text or send somebody a bill. My husband had a visit with a chiropractor, and he had a shingles shot, and he got really sick, and he canceled the appointment. And she didn't say a word. She didn't call him, send him a bill he never went back.
Right. So if we find ourselves in this needy situation, how can we get out of it?
Well, number one, you have to recognize what's happening inside. Everything that you're going to hear today from now until doomsday is always about what's happening between you and you. Recognize that feeling that I'm it's a feeling that I call it stickiness. It's like I'm begging. It's like in relationships when somebody calls too many times, or somebody's, overbearing. Recognize what's happening within you and stop.
Another, what it makes me think of, and one of the things that I do is I try to focus on the other person and go into active listening, which I know is one of the things you're about to talk about. So I make a point of getting out of my own head and all the things that my voices are telling me, which may or may not be true, and focus on the other person and how I can solve their problem.
Beautiful.
And that helps a whole lot, because it just gets me away from all the voices that are yelling at me.
Because we as service providers, whatever it is that you're providing, the customer is the person whose attention we need to pay attention to. So this goes back again to preparation. I'm going to go through it real quickly. Did I research who I was meeting with? Did I have a starting figure in mind? We talked a little about that. Did I have a figure in mind to walk away? This is a really important one. And that'll keep you out of that desperate thing. I know that this is my bottom line. And I always think about, well, this is not the only deal it's not the only job. It's not the only person. It's just not the right one for me. Trading for negotiating for services. So I'm going to run through,
Yes, right.
So I can get to that slide, and we're going to go back to active listening. And you mentioned that, Elizabeth. I like to call myself a professional listener because I have worked on this skill for many years, and I have some tenets that I work with. Okay, the most basic tenet of human nature is that we all want to be heard. We love to talk. Some of us like to talk more than others. Some of us kind of don't like to talk at all. But the most important thing is that I can listen and hear what you're saying with my whole body. And so when I say that listening with your whole body, it means I'm very present. I might get distracted over here. There might be sounds, there might be a phone call, there may be something comes up on my whatever. But if I miss what you're saying, I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you to say it again. So my whole body, my whole mind is connected to you. Again, I have an open body position, because if I'm sitting there like this, what is
arms folded? Yeah.
Arms folded. This says, I'm already closed off to what it is that you're saying. And somebody's going to pick that up. I lean in, right? When they talk about lean in, when somebody leans in, that means that they are listening to you. So if you do that, then somebody will come back to you. Smile. This is what we talked a little bit before. be personable. Listen again, and if something makes you feel warm, then give somebody a smile. Hold your head high, your back straight. Your posture is really important. So if I'm leaned over and I'm just kind of like this, I'm not really giving you very much of my attention, and that other person is just not going to want to talk to me. And make eye contact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Often harder than one thinks.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. But it's all these things that we're talking about are a practice.
Mhm.
You have to be aware when you're learning a new skill, any new skill. How is my body? How, I can lean in with my back straight. I can smile. Like all these things, we have to be conscious, right? And so that's what mindfulness is all about. Mindfulness is being aware in the present moment without judgment.
Mhm.
And so you may want to, I know we do this for speaking, videotape yourself, imagine yourself, see how you are, and kind of get a feeling of how you might be coming across to somebody. I don't know why it keeps doing that. I don't know. Okay, so make eye contact, and with your words, stay on the same wavelength. With means listening carefully. If I have a mantra or commitment to myself that when I'm talking with somebody, I don't ever move on without making sure that I have heard what they said.
Yes.
Right? Because many times, if you're not aware of this, you're already thinking of the next thing that you want to say.
Very common. Yes.
Most common, most natural. Right? But if I do that, then I've already missed what they're saying. And they may have gone off into some other completely different, wavelength. And I'm over here kind of answering something that it's a disconnect. How well can you stay on the same wavelength? And if you miss something, feel free to say, I just got distracted from it. I didn't catch what you said. Could you repeat what you said? Let me make sure that I understand what you're saying. And so these are counseling skills. And as a counselor or a coach or any one of these things, you learn these skills of active listening. Very, very, very important. When you're listening to somebody, listen also to their words. So those of us that are familiar with NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, people are either very visual, they're auditory, or they're kinesthetic, or a combination of these three. There's 5 senses, but these are the ones that we want to listen for the most. If don't move on until you're sure that you understand each other. Again, this is just what we just talked about. Be careful in thinking what you want to say. So let me come back. So if I'm listening to you, Elizabeth, and you say to me, I hear what you're saying, Tina. This is going to give me an indication that the auditory, skill is something that is highly developed within you. So I'm going to come back and say, I hear you too. Or I'm going to use words, or the sound of something makes me feel like blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to use the words that you use. If you're visual, you're going to say, I see what you mean. And so I may use visual pictures. Can you imagine? Just imagine yourself, somebody who is auditory, generally the visual is not as strong. So I wouldn't go there. And kinesthetic is I feel. I sense, I feel, and so I might use feeling words. And it's the same thing as mirroring somebody's posture sometimes brings you into what we call rapport. And these are just, again, little tricks and tips of things that might help you become a better listener.
And because the thing that I keep going back to is rule number 1 when you're presenting yourself is to make it about them. And so if they are visual people, then you're going to respond with visual language, even though you might be an auditory or a kinesthetic person.
Exactly.
You want to be on their wavelength.
Exactly. Exactly. And then these are what we call these clarifying questions. Do I understand you correctly? And repeat what you thought that you heard them say. Again, another danger is making assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to be pretty intuitive, and yet what I learned is my intuition is a great hunch. I could no sooner go on and say to you, Elizabeth, I know exactly what you're thinking, because I don't. I might have an idea of what you're thinking, and I might ask you, is this what's going on? Is this kind of what you're thinking? And you're going to say either yes or no. And that helps me know whether I'm on the mark.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about the people that we're drawn to, they're very authentic and very real. And they're also usually pretty perceptive on our wavelengths. Now, again, there may be two people that I could never enter the conversation, or it's just not my thing. And yet they'll come together like wonderfully. But I want to make sure that I'm with you. I'm just always with you. And so I'm going to ask these questions, and I can't repeat it enough times to make sure that you're together with the person that you're talking with. Here's another wonderful, it's a question. I'm wondering if this might be going on.
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering if this might be what you're thinking.
Right. Which works very well in a negotiation when you're trying to understand what they want.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And so what I was going to say before, and I kind of lost my train of thought, when somebody gets us, it's just like heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. When you feel like when you're talking with somebody, and if you're talking about something that you're trying to figure it out or you don't really know, and somebody kind of like just nails it for you. And that's what you want to do in a negotiation. You want to be able to nail what you think that they're thinking, or what you think is important to them, so that you're drawing out all those things. Again, remember, they're over here and they have a problem that needs to be solved. And what's the gap between where they are and where you can take them? All these things kind of come in here. Would this work for you? Or would this be helpful? Or again, you want to be the one that's also asking most of the questions. That's how somebody controls a negotiation, is being the one who's asking most of the questions.
Right, exactly.
And again, notice when you get distracted, and if you've missed something that they've said, come back and ask them again.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to ask them to repeat.
And they may not know exactly what they mean or what they need until they've talked about it.
That's right. That's right. And one of the other wonderful things that you can do is I like to synthesize what I think I hear somebody saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be over here, and people say, well, I'm all over the place. Well, no, not really, because I'm really following your train. Mm-hmm. You're going over here, and you're going over here, and you're going over here, but I'm finding a thread. And that's, again, from the active listening. Mm-hmm. It comes to you. You see it here, you see it here, you see it, and then you can pull it together and say, is this what's really important to you?
Mm-hmm. And then can you solve their problem?
Yes.
Because if it is, yeah, right.
That's right. And if you can't solve their problem, be very, very clear that you may not be the right person. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to that desperate, you're willing to walk away, not the right client, not the right job, not the right situation.
I find that actually with speaking gigs, when somebody says, here we have this speaking gig and we want to, or I say, I'd love to speak on your podcast. And then it turns out that I don't fit what they're looking for, or they want me to speak. And I look at it and I said, I don't think I'm the right fit. One of the great ways to get a benefit from that is to recommend somebody, because then you've still given service. You've
Correct.
Still helped them. Or if you're asking for, and I'd like to be on your podcast, and they say, Oh my goodness. So we've just had 3 speaker trainers in a row. I can't bring you out. Then you say, well, here are some people you could talk about. When should I get back to you?
Mhm.
And when are you ready to hear my take on it? And then go back from there.
So you've talked a lot, Elizabeth, about follow-up.
Yes, follow-up is huge.
Follow-up is huge. And let's just say that, you have this one conversation and somebody says they want to think about it.
Mhm.
And just like you modeled, when can we talk? Can we put something on our calendar? And can I get back to you on such and such a day? And closing it up, making it tight, and really not giving people the opportunity to be just who they are, because people get busy and then they, all of that stuff.
Well, and one of the statistics about sales, and any negotiation is a sales negotiation, is if you're the person who wants to get something from this, is that only about 8% of people actually follow up after the first conversation. So it's one of the things I'm constantly reminding myself to do. I'm not always perfect, but if I'm talking to somebody and whether they're going to hire me or not, then I say, I'll send you a proposal. Let's book a call for tomorrow so that you can ask me any further questions that come up.
There you go. So you're taking care of the detail for them.
Yes.
And that's also part of being just a good business person, or just that you want to make things easy for people.
Mm-hmm.
Have it ready. You have contracts ready. You have this ready. You have proposals, all the kinds of things to make it easy. So let's just kind of jump. This is be aware of your tone. That's incredibly, incredibly important, because you could, and your eye, if your eyes are rolling in your head or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to kind of jump through this right now. We're going to get to the emotional control.
Right.
Here we go. All right. Emotional control. Again, here's this, another exercise. So for your listeners, they could do it right now if they're on. And if not, you can do this in your own time.
Mm-hmm.
Bring up your most uncomfortable feeling that you had during those 3 scenarios. So I'll go back to those scenarios of you were selling or offering your services to somebody who had no money, or a company who had no money. The other one was they had a lot of money. And the third one was you didn't know how much money they had.
Mm-hmm.
Just notice. And then can you find the sensation or the discomfort in your body? We've talked a lot about this body-mind connection. And the discomfort in your body gives you a clue that you're uncomfortable. Something is off. Something doesn't feel right. And then can you describe the feeling and put it in words and the location of the sensation?
For me, it's always in my stomach. When my stomach starts to churn, and I said, oh, something's going on, I better pay attention.
There you go.
Yes. Or it might
Again,
mean I'm hungry, but
And you may not even know what it's saying or why that's happening, but you know that something is putting your system on alert.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when I say, I had a client not too long ago who canceled at the last minute, and I only meet with her once a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I waited till the whole month to bring up the policy of, and she said, oh yeah, I wasn't sure. And anytime that I thought about sending her a text or sending her a bill, I just got that feeling inside, like, no, we need to talk about this. Mm-hmm. And it stopped me from doing something that I didn't feel good about.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling is what I'm most connected to. And the feeling then brings up a lot of old experiences.
Yes.
Where I've gotten myself into trouble.
So when you get to the end of this list, I've got one more question to ask you as we wrap this up. Does the feeling feel familiar? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then that gives me information. I know this feeling. I'm going to pay attention. When else have I experienced it? Okay. And so there's so much more here, Elizabeth. This is kind of a good part of the whole course. So these are tidbits of things that you can learn about yourself and learn about our negotiation.
Well, let's read this, the next one for those who are listening, the know thyself, because that's very important.
Yeah. Where and when in the process, did you get anxious and give in or give up?
Right. Okay. And what else do we know about that?
And what did you notice about your body? Can you recognize how your body gives you information? And then this goes into the whole, do you know how to regulate your nervous system so that your body is calm and your mind is clear? And that really is the essence of mastery under pressure. One of the things that I think about a lot is we all love rules, and not rules, but recipes.
Yes.
How do I get from here to here? And I'm in this negotiation, and then what do I do this, and then I do that, and then I do that. Well, we can only prepare, but we don't really know what's going to happen.
Right.
And so the skills that I teach here are the ones that prepare you to be able to be agile and to be able to think clearly on your feet, to recognize. My son and I were talking the other day, and he said, Mom, what you teach reminds me of what they teach in the Army, is how to improvise, how to adapt, and then how to overcome whatever it is that you need to overcome to get to your goal.
Well, Tina Greenbaum, this has been awesome. If you would skip to your last slide, I've got one more question to ask you as we finish. But first of all, how do we find out more?
So you can get in touch with me, and if you're interested really in learning more, you can make an appointment with me. I'm generous with my 30-minute consultation. So this is masterycalendar.com, where you can make you can get an appointment on my calendar.
And we will put all this in the comments, right?
Yes, 631-988-1109. You can text me. And masteryunderpressure.net is a quiz that you can take on your own and find out where you are in this level of peak performance and keeping your body calm and your mind clear. And you'll get a really good sense of the skills that go into helping you do that.
Great. I am going to stop your sharing because I've got one last question for you, which is, we've all had negotiations where we blew it, where we screwed up. How does one, and then of course, like I, for instance, can remember in my 20s when I insulted that guy, things like that, and I may still be beating myself up for a bad negotiation when I was 25, things like that. How do we move forward if indeed you think you did a terrible job?
Well, as we say, failure, the only thing that is failure is if you don't learn from it. And there is no such thing as perfection. And we are all human. And I love the term beginner's mind, because a beginner's mind allows for mistakes and allows for I don't really call it failure. Again, if I've learned something, and I think the last talk that we did, I might have shared the story of how I had a figure in mind, and then when it came out, I just was, that much lower. And I said, well, I will do that much more. And so that was a classic one. And I studied, how did I get there?
Mhm.
What was
How
it
did you sabotage yourself?
that, right? So and the other thing about the term mindfulness that I love very much, it's being aware in the present moment without judgment.
Mhm.
So I can go back and look at these situations and not judge myself. I can learn from them.
Mhm.
And there's also another wonderful saying that helps me. We make decisions based on the best information we have available at the present time.
Ah, thank you. Say that one again, please.
We make decisions
Uh-huh.
based on the best information that we have available at the present time.
That sounds like a tweetable tweet, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. So if I only learned up to here, I couldn't know anymore, or I didn't see that was happening, or I didn't pick it up, or it hit my blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
At 23 years old, I married the person that was not the right person. Based on the best information I had at the present time, that's how I made that decision.
Great.
And that really helps with regrets.
Yes. Yeah. And to let it go and move on, because you can't change it.
Cannot change. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of these things easier said than done, but
yeah. Tina Greenbaum, thank you so very, very much for having been on the Speakers Who Get Results podcast and Strategic Speaking for Results broadcast. This is
we also have our Confident Negotiator course, which people
yes. So we will be posting a link to the course in how to be a confident negotiator, which you can get from Tina. And you have a discount, you said?
I have a 25% discount.
Wow.
For anybody that signs up from your podcast.
Okay.
And the code word is confident, and it'll be in your notes. And it is a lot of what we talked about today, plus. Mm-hmm. And it's $197 is the retail price. So it's very affordable. And my goal is to be able to give these skills to as many people that want to take advantage of them.
Well, thank you so very much, Tina. It's been a delight to have you here on the broadcast. And for everybody else, thank you for listening. And this is Elizabeth Bachman. I will see you on the next one. Well, that was a lot of fun for me. There's so much information in how to be a confident negotiator. Don't forget that if you're interested in hearing how your presentation skills are strong and where you might need a little bit of help, you can take our free 4-minute assessment, especially good before you walk into a negotiation. Go to speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you're strong as a presenter and where a little support might get you better results and the recognition you deserve. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'm so delighted to have you as a listener. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.